Howdy, folks. Welcome back to the podcast. We once again have the privilege of answering some of the questions that you have submitted in our question box over at nowthatwe'reafamily.com. And as usual, it's a treat to hear about the things that you're working through in your homes, some of the questions you're pondering with your spouse. And then we get to ponder them kind of in front of you, really, is how we're doing it. And so thank you for submitting those questions, giving us food for thought. And I hope that us discussing them can be enlightening to those of you that have asked the questions. Or maybe if you didn't ask these questions, you hear the question and you think to yourself, man, I wish I would have asked that question now that I think about it. Folks, we really appreciate each and every one of you. We're grateful when you take the time to leave a rating or a review on iTunes or on Spotify. Or if you watch us on YouTube, if you subscribe to the channel, that's extremely helpful to us. Or if you like the video, comment, all those things are really, really helpful, and we really appreciate it. So with that said, we'll get it rolling.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
Okay, so we are going to start off here with some questions for you guys. We've got all our kiddos down for naps, so it seems like a good one to start off with would be, do you film your podcast at the same time week to week? How are you able to do that with an infant? I have one child now, 16 months, who has always been an unpredictable napper, and I still never know if or when she will nap.
Yeah, well, we do actually have a pretty regular routine when it comes to filming and recording the podcast, and we're able to do that because of how, I guess, systematized you've been in the children's naps. That is extremely helpful. And then also their bedtimes, because like right now we're recording during the kids' naps, and that's our favorite time to record. It's middle of the day. We feel very, clear-headed. We've got energy. But if we miss that opportunity, or if we have another commitment, we will at times record after the kids go to bed at nighttime. And again, we enjoy that as well, but it's just not quite the same. It's not our favorite. It's our second favorite time to record the podcast.
Yeah. So anyways, that comes down to, and what's funny, yeah, it goes in and out for me, whether I prefer the afternoon or the evening time. But like in response to this question, we do have a really predictable napper and napping schedule, starting from, I don't know, around 3 months old. And that is just due to sleep training and not focusing so much on the training when it comes to sleep, but the cycle and the distances between feedings. So it's more about feeding the baby than getting the baby to sleep. The baby will naturally sleep on its own if you set it up with a cycle of feeding. So anyways, I go in depth into that, and I think I have a couple sleep training videos. I think sleep training is kind of misunderstood maybe, as this, it has to be this traumatic experience for mommy and baby. And that hasn't been the experience in our home at all. So anyways, for a little different perspective, you can head over and watch that video if it would be something that would be helpful for you in your home. I do think that for a mother that is home all day, or even a mom that's gone during the day, having times that you can count on for rest in your day is such a blessing, because you can plan your day around it, and then you aren't strung out or stressed out even if you have like a hard morning or you have a really daunting afternoon, because okay, I'm going to have 2 hours of total peace and quiet in the middle of the afternoon. Like that for me is game changing as a mother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I tell you what, that right there, the fact that you can count on that seems like it's a game changer. It is life changing that you have this 2 hour window on a regular basis, you do protect that too. Like you're not like going out and meeting with friends during that time. No. It's like, it's your go time. It's your power hours right there in the middle of the day. And I'm grateful that we can use them for the podcast as well.
Yeah. So anyways, I really feel for you if you feel like any time I can count on to rest and recharge, that can really make that sense of overwhelm and burden build up. And it can be hard to delight in your children if you never know when everybody's getting a break. So yes. I would encourage you to really, it's worth pursuing that nap, and it's very, very possible. A lot of my friends have dedicated napping schedules, and it really has a lot more to do with the mother than the child in most cases. If the mother really wants it, then through consistency, you can train that to happen. And if it's not worth it to you, then then obviously it doesn't need to.
Yeah. And same goes, I think, for bedtime, because
Yes.
it's nice to be able to count on something. If your bedtimes for your kids are all over the place, there is no finish line, or like the finish line for the day is always moving. And I even think of as recently as last night, putting our kids to bed, and there were a couple things you and I both wanted to do. It's like we didn't get workouts in during the day, but we knew the kids were going to bed. They were going to be in bed between 7 and 7:30, and we were going to have a chunk of time between when the kids were in bed and we were going to bed that we could kind of do some things that we wanted to finish up for the day or do some bookend things. And we both like took 30 minutes to work out really quick before hopping in the shower for the night. And so when you can look forward to that thing at the end of the day, that end, then you can count on wrapping up your day once the kids, are down.
Yeah, I think this is just a big reason why parents are always overwhelmed and always frazzled, because you're on call 24/7. And that's just not something that I've ever experienced in our home aside from that, 6 to 8 week newborn season. And I tell you, it really gives everyone in the home energy when parents know, like, you have hours. Like, unless a child is sick, we don't wake up in the middle of the night. And I think we haven't for years, if it's not for that postpartum 6 to 8 weeks, or a child is sick. And so, whenever people make the jokes about like, oh, we haven't slept for 5 years or whatever, I'm just like, how are you doing that?
Wow.
Like that just wouldn't work for us. And I know it can sound kind of regimented, but it doesn't mean like we don't go to home group and stay up till 8:30, or the kids haven't gone to bed at 9 or 10. Like, there are seasons for that. Sometimes we get to surprise them with a later bedtime or whatever. But
yeah, I wouldn't even say seasons. I just think days. Like, there are random days
it's not a season. You're right.
Where that occurs. Cool.
Yeah,
I'll ask a question.
Okay.
Ready for this? Should I let my third grader read abridged, adapted, or /adapted versions of some of the classics so as to introduce her to great stories without overwhelming her at such a young age?
What do you think?
I'm asking you the question.
Okay, you're asking me the question. Yeah. So I would say, I can just tell you what we do in our home and what I did growing up. And I loved reading great illustrated classics, which are kind of like graphic novels. They have a picture on a page. And it was my first introduction to chapter books as a child. And all I can say is, if my children love reading as much as I love reading, I will have succeeded in life with my children's reading goals. So we do let our kids read great illustrated classics. They love them. They get acquainted with the stories. Again, I think you could read the unabridged versions to children, which we have done with, Treasure Island and The Jungle Book, and some of the more easily accessible versions of unabridged copies of classics. Yeah. But when it comes to a child reading on their own, I think it's fantastic just to be able to introduce them to the stories as soon as possible. And then when you read, Great Expectations, you read Moby Dick, you read The Three Musketeers, or all these things later, it can really help actually your understanding of what's going on. If you already have kind of a thin thread of the plot line, you're able to follow a lot more, and I think actually get a lot more out of the story if you just keep layering complexity with language and vocabulary and plot and all those things. I don't know. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, because I grew up reading the great illustrated classics as well. It's funny you mentioned Moby Dick and The Three Musketeers. Those were two that I distinctly remember reading at a young age and loving the stories. And both of those I've read as an adult. I mean, I'm in the middle right now of Three Musketeers again, the unabridged version. And when you read all like the French names, the French, cities, the places that they are going in the, and some of those French names are obviously in the great illustrated classics as well, but they don't have like the French lines. Mm-hmm. Obviously there's the translation that I'm reading, right? It's in English, but then they still have French, lines here and there, and how discouraging that would be as a kid. You're like, I'm not even going to give that a chance, right? But because I know I like the story, I know I've seen it through, it is rewarding. I'm far more, and obviously I'm just older, you're far more willing, I think, to struggle through some of those words and names that you don't know how to pronounce. And the best is like trying to, explain it to somebody else. You can like read it on a page. You're like, I know what's going on. And you try to describe a character or what they said. And you're kind of like, actually, I have no clue how to pronounce any of this, but it's fun to read.
Yes.
And the same was with Moby Dick. I loved that as a kid, and then reading it as an adult was really rewarding, even though it was so much more work.
Yeah. I agree with you. So that's how we're taking it in our home. It's like these stories are captivating. Why not introduce them at a grade level that the kids can read first?
Yes.
When we read picture books about some of these stories, right? Like it doesn't mean it wrecks the real thing.
Yeah. And I think too, and Leon's said this, so, our oldest has said this since he just started learning how to read. And he started like uncovering, he said it was like, he would use this language, like it's like discovering a code, and I can remember he picked up a novel that I was reading at the time. And he goes, Dad, I have no clue what this says, but I just know someday I'll be able to uncover all the cool things books like this have to say. And it was fun to hear him say that at a young age, he realized the more you exercise that muscle of reading and of comprehending and of trying to understand, the more layers of life you get to peel back, and you get to see more of God's design. You get to enjoy different depths of stories, and they can become more poignant, and they can become all the more profound. And so it's fun to give that vision. So you can't just give them the easy stuff. I think you also need to cast a vision for the harder stuff as well. Yeah,
we try to do that in our home through read alouds and then through what Elisha and I are reading as well. Okay, actually I'm trying to think where I should go here. Can you tell us real quick, Elisha, about Voetberg Music Academy?
Sure. Voetberg, wow. Quickly. I don't know. Yeah, Voetberg Music Academy has become a huge joy for me. This was actually the first business Katie and I started together. We weren't even married yet. And we sat down in her grandma and grandpa's office and set up a camera and started filming the Voetberg Music Academy. And so that was 8 years ago. And here we are. Our kids are going through it, and we're utilizing all of those resources. And obviously we've grown upon those early lessons and improved upon them. But I think more fired up than ever because I'm seeing firsthand how much joy music can bring to a home and how much confidence it puts in children when they learn a skill. And that is so contagious within all the kids. It's creating culture. And again, music is just one skill that I think you can learn as a family, or one of your children can learn, and it starts spreading. And it's really fun to be able to offer that skill building opportunity, those lessons, that direction to families, across the world. And when we do like our monthly recitals on Voetberg Music Academy, when we do, even just like our coaching sessions, our workshops, meeting families that are playing music together or that are learning music together is so inspiring. And then you get to hear them perform on the calls. And
it's so fun.
It's funny because I love, obviously, now that we're a family in general, being able to connect with different families. But I feel like Voetberg Music Academy has actually lent to more connection time with like-minded families than a lot of our other programs have, because we're all in the trenches of like learning instruments for ourselves, teaching our kids, we're relating. We have the same goal, like bringing our children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord and giving them these skill sets to minister to each other and to the body of Christ. And so it's really fun to, I guess, not just offer this teaching, this instruction, this platform at an affordable rate for families and for individuals as well, but then to also feel like I get to build a community with them at the same time. It's really fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was great. Yeah. We did want to share with you guys a little bit about Voetberg Music Academy today. And we meant to do it at the beginning of the episode, and then I bombed that.
That's all right.
So I thought I'd just put you on the spot here in the middle of the episode.
So that wasn't even a question.
No, that wasn't a question.
That's funny. I thought that was an actual question.
No, that was just from me because we wanted to share a discount code with you guys. It is down in the description box. If you listen to us on the podcast, then you will get a discount if your family decides to join Voetberg Music Academy. Again, that was supposed to be at the beginning of the episode, but thank you, Elisha, for putting it here in the middle.
Anytime.
Okay. I do have an actual question for you, though. What do you call your in-laws when speaking to them? Their first names or mom and dad?
So I call my in-laws by their first names.
And I do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because I grew up calling Joe and Lisa Mr. and Mrs. Voetberg my whole life. And so it's kind of a big deal to transition to calling them Joe and Lisa when we were dating.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I was like, oh, I'm an adult now. But that was just a quick question. We don't call them mom and dad. And obviously I would totally do that if that's what I do feel like my in-laws are my second parents, but I also personally really love that they don't expect us to call them mom and dad because I don't know. I appreciate that, but I think it'd be sweet if they wanted those titles too.
I guess I never formally asked your parents what they preferred being called. But and I think that's the thing too, is that I had a relationship with them prior to, they just always have been Chad and Janice to me. And even before we were dating, you know, I knew them, and I feel like I had a relationship established with them that was, you know, alongside even knowing you. And then so when we started dating, again, maybe I should ask them. Maybe it is more honoring to call them father and mother or mom and dad. I don't know, but it's just not what I would go to at all. It's not my natural. It's not my preference.
What's funny is Elisha and I don't even really have pet names for each other very much. Like, everyone would give us a hard time. They're like, when you guys are dating, if you like really like each other, you just say each other's like full names. And that's kind of still the case. We just aren't like the babe, honey, like little pet name couple.
Yeah, we've never done it. Maybe Katie babe. Have I said that?
Yeah, you call me that.
Every once in a while.
And when I text you, I call you handsome. But I mean, you know that. Right?
That's you that texts that?
Okay. I'm like, you're like, like it's the first time you're hearing that. But I don't actually call you that in real life that much. So. Okay,
here's a question for you, Katie.
Yes.
Babe. Katie babe. How do you manage to read a book while you're at the park when you have 5 kids to watch? I often find I'm watching my kids and making sure someone doesn't run off with them. Or I am at the swing set pushing my little ones. They love the swings. There is also water at most of the parks we go to, so there's that danger too.
Okay, so if there was like a pond or something, there's no way I would be reading a book while my kids are there. So we do read next like splash pads or stuff like that, but not deep water where someone could get hurt. That's just not worth it, obviously. And then there are certain parks, like if we go to the downtown park, there is no way we're reading at that park. There's so many kids at that park. Elisha and I don't even go there by myself. Usually we go there together and just circulate that thing, trying to keep an eye on our kids.
Right.
It's like so stressful. So anyways, depending on what your parks look like, that might not be the best place to read. Mm-hmm. Here in our neighborhood, there are a lot of little tiny neighborhood parks where there might be one other family there. There might be no other families there. Sometimes we go to the bigger parks and I will rarely bring a book there because there are just a lot more kids. And so like you're mentioning, there's just a lot of little people to keep eyes on. Some of the parks we go to, quite a few of them actually don't have swings. And so, that's not a thing. The big 3 know how to pump themselves, which is nice. They know mama's not always available for pushing. So it kind of depends. If I were trying to get my kids out in nature and read, and we didn't have the neighborhood park situation like we have right now, I'd probably do the whole Charlotte Mason concept, load them up, drive out to some field or natural resource where water isn't around, set up a picnic blanket and snacks, and lay there and read while the kids play and build forts and that stuff. We've done that before, and I'm a huge fan of that. And I would go for that over parks if every park around us was like a really social busy place.
Yeah, you're extremely strategic on where you take the kids in the middle of the day. Like you find out quickly where the busy parks are, you know, right when school gets out, or, you know, at the morning time. I mean, sometimes you guys go to the park right around 10 a.m. Mm-hmm, is that like a time that you go to the parks, and you know which parks are sunny or where the weather's better at those parks. And so you kind of have your hit list of parks to go to based off the time of the day or the season even. And as you said, when we go to the downtown park, that's like, it's kind of a treat because it'll be like a family outing day where we, go and we get coffee and then we go to the park and maybe we'll even go out to lunch. But that is not a bring a book to the park day at all. That is, you're like on the high alert, looking out And that's the thing too, is that even at some of those smaller parks, if Katie's there with the kids and there's nobody around, but then like one guy starts to walk around, you're not just going to like keep reading.
Well, not if there's one guy. No, it's like if there's a mom and her other kids show up, I kind of stop, see who the other kids are, what their ages are, how are the kids interacting, and then I might read. So anyways. And
I think something that we've both gotten better at, and having children and still enjoying to read, is being able to enjoy just a paragraph at a time. Even or to enjoy just a page at a time. I think that for a long time, I thought that unless I could really get ensconced in a book, it wasn't worth picking up. But now, less is fun, especially when you get momentum in a book. you just like want to see the next paragraph, or you want to get another page in, and it feels really fun and it gives you more food for thought. And so even getting a half a page read and then you have to go chase your kids around still feels worth it, I think, to both of us.
Yeah, someplace that we like to go, some of like my favorite reading spots are like there's a neighborhood little sled hill in our neighborhood, and so when the kids sled there, I sit in the stroller and read just right at the top of the hill. And then other places like we call it the tree climbing park, but it's really a dog run. It's a place in the neighborhood where like people go and throw balls to their dogs, but there's these trees along it. And so there's rarely any other people there, or they're engaging with their dogs. And so I sit there on the stroller and read while the kids climb trees. So I don't know, maybe just go out to the forest and bring a blanket and let your kids crawl around.
I like it.
I don't know. That sounds awesome to me, actually. Okay. Elisha, do you have a TV? Will you ever give your kids an iPad? What things do you do while traveling for their entertainment or eating out?
Oh, there you go. So no, we do not. We do not have a television. We don't have iPads or iPhones. We don't have smartphones, and we will never give our kids iPads or smartphones while they're young. Or when they're old. Honestly,
like
for
while
that matter,
they're at home.
Yeah, while they're at home, basically. Yeah. I could see if like when they're 16 and they have a car and they come to us and they want a smartphone, we'd probably try to talk through the pros and the cons and see where they're at. I don't know if we'll necessarily like never allow a smartphone in our home at that age, but
yeah, exactly.
Like,
but we'll reconsider at 16.
Yeah,
essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
but like, I think we will get them cell phones when they are younger, just to have when we're at the mountain, or if they're, traveling with friends to whatever, some homeschool event. It's nice for them to be able to have forms of communication, but those will, I think, be dumb phones for sure. And then, yeah, again, it's crazy. You know how research is coming out. There's more and more research just showing how the difference between like a computer screen or a television screen versus an iPad, like a touch screen, it's far more addictive to the child. It's far more damaging to their brain. And so the iPad's an easy no for us. The television, again, an easy no for us because we didn't grow up with televisions in our living rooms. They weren't a big part of our life. And we want like right now, the piano is kind of like the centerpiece of our living room. And then we have books there. And so we really want to just kind of like facilitate reading, music, conversation. And I don't think a television being front and center in the living room, or in any room for that matter, facilitates that as well. And so that's I think our main reason for not having a television. And so the screens in our home are 2 laptop computers.
Yeah, so you're seeing them here. And like if we were going to watch a family movie night, then we would pull out our laptop and watch it. Or if Elisha and I were to watch a movie, then we'd watch it on our laptop. And, that does happen every couple months with our kids. We'll pick a movie that we really like, maybe once a quarter, and have a family movie night. It's really, really fun. And that's just what we use. We use our laptops.
Yeah. And then when it comes to road trips, it's just never been an expectation for our kids. And they really look forward to audio like stories. Sometimes they're dramatized and sometimes they're not. They're just stories that are read. And they love those. Katie's done a really good job of getting other activities for them to do on longer road trips. And our kids really have just been great at road tripping since the beginning. So they color, they play. What else do they do?
They talk a lot and play a lot of random games. I don't even know what they are. Yeah. Like they just make stuff up, you know. Sometimes they'll bring little packets of Lego, build Lego. Yeah. Sometimes they've knitted in the car. Sometimes, we'll actually do. We have a few trips where we're flying this summer and stuff like that. And I thought it could be fun to list all of our favorite activities that the kids do while traveling.
Oh, sure.
Because we do have a handful of those. One thing that they really, really enjoyed that are recent that our friends gave us are sticker by number and sticker by letter books, depending on like the age of the child. And so those have been really fun, and they totally captivates them. And you don't have a bunch of, like, it's all contained. You don't have markers in the car or colors, or it doesn't work because you need a certain piece to go with it or something like that. It's all contained in the book. And so they get a lot of joy out of those, and those are great for airplane flights as well. So Yeah, but you mentioned what things do you do while traveling for their entertainment or eating out. And I think something that Elisha and I just really do not value a ton of, or that we don't place a ton of stock in, is entertainment. I think we put a lot of stock in creating, and creating in and of itself is entertaining, but it's not a consuming form of entertainment. It's one where you're adding value to the atmosphere that you're in. And that's not to say that we can never rest or relax or things like that, but I think creating can be really restful and relaxing too. So instead of thinking, okay, well, how are we going to entertain our kids? It's like, how are we going to engage our kids? And that's kind of the question that we ask more often than not. If we're all at a eating out, right? We go out to eat probably once a week, or I don't know. Usually if we go out to eat as a family, it's after church on Sunday. Today we came home, so maybe it's like twice a month.
Yeah.
Then we'll do something like that. Yeah. But when we go out to eat, it's like it's not how do we entertain our kids? How do we engage our kids around the table? So Elisha and I don't have any technology there, so it's not like we're on our phones. So we're able to ask questions, visit about the day. Like, it's a fun time to be able to just sit around and visit, talk about the food, talk about, anything.
Yeah, I'm sure all of the parents listening can relate to you not realizing your kids are listening to your conversation, and then they pipe in with their commentary, and it is just so fun. They usually say the most sincere, there's no guile in their communication and in their intentions, and so you get to hear their unfiltered perspective of what it is you're talking about. So you could be talking about the sermon, or you could be talking about a conversation you had after church, and out of nowhere, one of your 4-year-old or your 5-year-old will pipe in with their commentary on your takeaway from the sermon, and it's just so fun and rewarding. And I want to encourage that type of engagement. Again, I want children to be able to know when it's time just to be quiet. What do we call that? Almanzo, right?
Almanzo style,
where they just, okay, the grownups are talking. If we go out with friends after church, I want the kids to know that, like, we're going to be talking as adults, and they can listen. If there's an emergency, or if there's something that they really want to, interject, then they can obviously put their hand on our shoulder. They can put their hand on our leg and ask a question. But I want them to be comfortable engaging in conversations, but I also want them to respect their elder, respect that, okay, these are adults having an adult conversation, and I don't need to have just as much airtime as the adults here.
Airtime. Did you get that from my family?
I don't know.
Like, growing up, we always had like airtime, like who's taking up the most airtime at the dinner table? Because when you have a lot of kids, airtime is very valuable.
It is, yes. It's limited.
I mean, you probably got it from everyone talks about airtime, I guess, on screens and stuff like that, but I didn't watch TV, so I thought we came up with airtime.
Okay, I'll ask one here.
Okay.
How do you deal with friends who pull away because your family life is too wholesome? We have recently been able to form positive community at church, and it's been amazing. However, our other friends have started to pull away as we grow as parents and as Christians.
Yeah, well, I'd be curious what you would say to this, but I think, praise the Lord. That's wonderful that you're growing closer to the Lord. You're growing closer to community as a body of believers. And I think that is a wonderful thing. I think loving friends who have been friends and just aren't ready to continue that same pursuit is obviously very important as Christians, but it doesn't need to be that our closest friends in one stage remain our closest friends in the other stage, especially as we've continued to grow. And we've seen over the years just ups and downs in friendship. And there's friends, it's just like life is just taking you two different ways for a while, but just stay true in what the Lord is leading you in. And you might be surprised at how when, maybe your friend's family gets a little older, or they start having complications with their children, or they're just looking at your life and going like, you know what, that's really refreshing. And they'll come to you because you've maintained an open, loving friendship with them for advice or encouragement. And maybe your lives will get a lot closer, in a couple years or 3 years or whatever. So anyways, I would just have that long-term perspective with the friendships and not expect it to always be the same though in every season.
Yeah, there is an ebb and flow, I think, to all relationships. And having a long-term perspective, I think, can be so helpful with family relationships and then with non-family relationships. It's easy to think, oh, man, maybe you make a decision to whatever, take your kids out of a public school. And so all of your friends that you were you had that in common, you would bring your kids to school, and then now you don't have that connection. And there's this tension because maybe they feel whatever judged, or maybe they whatever. It's like there's tension there. Like don't say things or do things that have long lasting ramifications, because that friendship the relationship will still be there. Like it might not feel like it's at the same depth or there's the same common ground that you had before, but you can refrain from saying something that's just immature or ultra judgy sounding or critical of how they're doing their life. And over time, the relationship will still be there. And this happens with family relationships all the time as well. I think when there's that ebb and flow of, it seems like you kind of veer off. I mean, I think even when you think of like politics, how that's such a divisive thing in families, where it's like people's, growth in that area of their life, their maturity in that area of life is going to be at a different pace than yours, just as it is with parenting and just as it is with, every area of life. And so you don't want to say something where that word is so divisive, or it's so hurtful that even when they do see things closer to how you see things, the last thing they're going to do is like come back and want to be friends with you, if that makes sense. And so, make
it easy for them to come back without being like embarrassed or
that's exactly right.
hurt.
Yes, that's exactly right. And obviously you want to be united in Christ. And so that's like the foundation for Christian friendship is Christ. But then I don't think you should take it personally, and I don't think they should take it personally if the other practical things of life lend to other friendships getting more of your time, right? Because the fact is that like when you've got 3 kids and your friend that's not yet married that, you grew up with, and that you were both, you're so close with, your brothers and sisters in Christ, or you were, very like-minded in your faith, you're just in a different season of life now. And they can say, well, we're united in Christ. That's the closest bond. You're like, absolutely. But then these other practical things are just requiring more time of me. And so that's just how life works, where like you just put more time into these things, then you form friendships based off of those things. Yeah.
And I would never say to change your convictions or what the Lord is leading you in to make anyone else feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. So loving people and holding a firm line is a hard line to walk, but it can be done. Mm-hmm. And it can be done in a really beautiful way.
Yeah. Obviously I want to grow in communicating love towards everyone. However, you can't control how you're being perceived always, right? You can't control that. And there is numerous times that, because I grew up in a conservative Christian homeschooled family, and you'd find out after the fact that, we didn't get invited to a certain wedding because they wanted to have alcohol, and they would have felt bad having us there because they wanted to have an alcohol and a dance afterwards. And and my parents or us just being like my parents are like, we don't care if there's alcohol, like we don't care if people are dancing. Like we don't have any issue with that. Like we're not probably going to partake in the way that a lot of the people are. But they kind of like took that upon themselves to say, well, this, we're not going to invite those people, but you can't control that. Always. And so
you can't control other people feeling uncomfortable.
Yes.
By having you there.
Yep.
So, okay, Elisha. So this question has gotten asked a variety of ways over the last, several months. I feel like it's coming more and more. And I think it's because maybe our boys are at a stage where people feel like, well, I feel like I can ask them because they have boys at a certain stage. And we haven't addressed it, but it's just a lot of people are asking. So I'm going to, Are you guys ready?
I'm nervous.
Okay. This gal says, I actually ran this. This is the question I ran by you before you started. It says, my 6-year-old son, 80% of the day has his hands down there. What's normal? How would you communicate with him? Through this? And so, various stages of, all you guys have been like so sensitive in the way that you've communicated this topic. But I thought we'll throw our 2 cents in the ring. I was curious what Elisha's thoughts were on this.
Yeah, I think especially while your boys are young, that's the perfect time you're teaching them behavior in general. You're teaching them just how to behave, when to yell, when not to yell, when to roll around on the ground and wrestle and when to not roll around the ground and wrestle. And you just incorporate like that, like, hey, don't grab your crotch, or don't grab your private parts, or like, that's not appropriate. And you don't need to make a huge deal out of it. I don't think, especially when they're young. I still have memory. So it probably wasn't that young, my dad being like, hey, don't touch your bottom, or don't hold your crotch like that. And especially, like, cause it might be like, I need to go to the bathroom. The classic little boy, he's like, I need to go potty. And my dad just being like, hey, that's not appropriate. Don't do that. And he's just teaching me how to act and how to behave. And it's I think that's
too as a little girl. It's just,
I think I'm doing that. I still do that with my boys. Not still. I think I probably will continue to do that. Just teaching them manners. Like, don't stop fidgeting. Like, it can just be another form of fidgeting. Like, kids will, when they get nervous, they'll want to put their hands up in their mouth or close to their mouth. Or girls will just like want to play. The little girls just want to play with their hair over and over and over again, or play with different parts of their clothing, their buttons, and just be like, hey, like, just put your hands at your side, stand up straight. And so I think I view it like that. Obviously, if it's like they're getting closer to adolescence and there's like more actual, hormonal things happening, it's probably a different conversation. But when they're little boys, they're just they're innocent, and so you just don't make a huge deal out of it. So, hey, don't touch that, don't grab there. It's not appropriate.
Yeah. So it sounds like if it's 80% of the day, then it's like, okay, this is just like a big habit that needs to be broken. Just like a kid like sucking their thumb or something like that. It's become this like comfort tick kind of.
Yep.
And it's not one that you want to carry into adolescence or adulthood or anything like that.
Yeah, hard to get a date. Walking around.
It's not going to go real well. So anyways, I do think too, something that came to my mind just with this is just, especially with little boys, I think we expect them to sit still. Like if a little boy has a fidget like that, then they're probably sitting a lot of the time, or just like not doing stuff. Because when they're out doing stuff, there's a lot to do with their hands that is actually profitable and more engaged. So maybe like school hours could be a little long or something like that, where it's just like they have all this perpetual time where they don't have their hands doing something.
Yeah,
that's profitable.
No doubt. I mean, just keeping your hands engaged, keeping busy. I mean, there's some line like idleness is the devil's
idle hands are the devil's workshop or something.
Something like that. And I think that starts, from a young age, just staying busy. And we're created to work. Before the fall, God put Adam and Eve in the garden, and there in Eden, and he gave them work. He said, toil, or it wasn't toil at that point, but it was what did he say? Actually, I'm trying to, take dominion, and to work. And it's just a part of human. It's God created us in his image. He creates, he works, and that's what we do. And so giving our boys at a young age things to work on with their hands, I think, is helpful. Yeah, I'm so grateful. I am so grateful that you are the father of our boys, because I just feel like you're so intentional with them, and you know what's a big deal and you know it's not a big deal. And I'm so thankful for that, because I come to Elisha with stuff just like, is this a huge deal or not? And I appreciate just your wisdom and you having lived it, obviously, as a boy and going to a man. And so you're grateful I'm the father of our boys. How do you feel about me being the father of your daughter? I'm also so grateful you're the father of Lucy. She just adores you. Okay, here's another question. So sweet. Hey, I would love to know your thoughts on churches with multiple campuses and massive congregations. I've been trying to find a church since moving to Florida. Are mega churches a bad thing? Also, I feel the need to keep my children with me for the service, not only being inspired by you guys, but also they have kids watch screens in children's church. Okay, so there's like so like they want their kids in church, but not just to have them with them in church, but it seems like they'd rather not have them watching screens too in children's church. Yeah, a combination of stuff here. So as far as what's funny is, growing up, I thought that the only reason you would have a megachurch is because you have a gospel that doesn't differentiate between sin and the blood of Jesus that saves you from that sin, and just like the easy believism. Just like come in and you don't need to change anything. You don't need to be convicted of anything. Like, we aren't even going to talk about sin. We aren't going to talk about what Jesus did. He loves you. God is love. Like, just say God is love and you're in. Mm-hmm. This is a social club. And
I formed that perception myself growing up, but I just thought that was the only way that churches would be appealing to all these people that were pouring in. And I grew up in Southern California for the first decade of my life. And so there was a lot of mega churches that we would like be a part of at one time or another. Is in we'd like visit them, we had relatives go to them, stuff like that. And what's funny is, as you know, we're up here in North Idaho now, and our church is just blowing apart at the seams. Every time we do a new rehab on the building, what do you call it?
Like an addition?
Every time we add on a new addition, we buy a new parking lot. It's like the sanctuary is too small already. The parking lot's too small already. Like, families are just flocking like crazy to healthy churches. And so, like, praise God for that.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with growth. And I guess I used to just buy into, I think I misunderstood that verse, which is broad is the way that leads to destruction and narrow is the way. You know, just thinking that narrow is the way, like, few there be that find it, right, that verse. I thought that anywhere the gospel was spreading like crazy, or people were wanting discipleship like crazy, it must have been the broad is the way. Like something was wrong with the church. Does that make sense?
Sure. Like,
Alicia?
if there was mass revival or mass, like if there's big crowds of salvation, you're kind of like, that's not sincere.
Yeah,
or
like it must not be right. You know, and obviously that's just not the case. So I think depending on why the church is huge, it can be fantastic.
Yeah.
Or it can be unhealthy.
Yeah, I think that there are probably huge churches. I mean, I can't think of any off the top of my brain, meaning like multiple campuses, you know, growing up, we went for a couple of years to Mars Hill, and that was kind of early on in that multiple campus, I guess, movement. And then they kind of disassembled or fell apart or something. And so we moved away from that. But I think the common perception of mega churches to, like, you know, conservative Bible believing Christians is pretty negative. And I think there's probably a good reason for that. I would guess, like, when you, and it's so hard to know what's more common than not. 'Cause like when you see memes or you see like something that feels like a caricature of like a celebrity pastor or what they're doing at their service, you're like, it is mind blowing. You're like, what is going on? You know, because people talk about like the smoke machines and the lights, but then that's like taken at some churches, it feels like that's taken to a whole new level.
Yeah, it's like Beyonce's coming and performing at the church.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what?
Yeah, and so there are definitely things like that I see where I'm like, what is going on? And it's not my church, and you just see a clip or you see a headline, and you're like, well, I don't agree with that. Like, I don't agree with that thing that church did. Is that indicative of everything the church does? Who knows? But it certainly stands out when they do crazy things like that. And so because of our personalities, because of our upbringings, I think we're attracted to smaller churches. We appreciate that. We're not real charismatic, even in our style of worship. And so we love singing hymns. We love when psalms are adapted to music. And we even just like a lot of the older contemporary Christian songs. And so like just our taste has gone that direction, I think, since being married, since forever. And I think our theology, I can't say that it like supports or doesn't support one or the other at this point. It really depends on the specific church. And so, like you said, I would love thousands of people to be able to come hear Pastor Steve preach and exposit that's our pastor, exposit the word, you know, proclaim the gospel. I would love more and more people to be able to come worship with us and sing the hymns, you know, and to fellowship with them. And that could be quickly, people could say, well, that's a mega church. I'm like, well, okay. In that instance, I think that could be a good thing. So yeah, I think there's numerous, I say that, like, I think I'm probably being a little bit charitable to like the average mega church. I'd say more often than not, the like huge churches or mega churches, I probably, if I got to the nitty gritty of like what they believe, what they taught, I'd probably not agree with very much of it. But I can't point to instances right now specifically, so I'm not going to try to.
I think we don't believe they're unbiblical.
Yeah.
per se. But I do think that when you're going to a church, it's really healthy to have discipleship, to have accountability, to be like genuinely discipled in your faith. And that can be very hard on a very large scale.
No doubt.
And so that doesn't mean you sit down with your pastor consistently per se. He might be really busy with like other members of the congregation, and that's a lot for one man to go around. But like, do you have elders that you're able to go to if your marriage is struggling, that you know by name, that you feel comfortable bringing that intimate subject to, or asking questions about your child training? Or do you have home groups that you can be a part of where you get to know, because basically the church it can have this structure to it. So even if there's a lot of people attending, there are more intimate pockets where you're still able to fellowship with believers and have that accountability with other groups of believers. I think, home groups or different things. That's one way that churches with a lot of people in them try to boil down. Because even if you're going to a church of 300 people, you can go there and never really be known or discipled.
Yes.
So I think that that's probably a more important component to the church is, do you agree with it theologically, doctrinally, the speaking, the pastor? Do you feel like the pastor is qualified? And then, are they supporting your family in the way that you believe to be biblical as well? If you don't want to send your child to, like, if you don't trust the Sunday school system that they're using to disciple your kids, then don't send them there,
Yeah. Just on a practical level, I think that's another reason why we haven't gone to what would be considered bigger churches or mega churches, is because they do not facilitate families very well. I don't think.
It's very, very difficult for them.
And I like it, again, just practical things. I like the lights being on in the sanctuary where you feel like you're actually with the other people in the congregation. It's not like, man, who's to your right and your left? You're like, man, I can't tell because I don't have a flashlight, but all the lights are on the stage, and it's like a show on the stage. I prefer it when the lights are on. And also this is very practical. It's just way easier to keep your kids engaged when the lights are on. Like when it's really hard when the lights are, that's again, a side note. And I'm just saying that
keep the lights on, guys. Okay.
Those are usually features of like the more mega church environments or big church environments where it seems like they put a lot of effort into the production. And like I said, I like things being done well. Right? Like, I don't think it's more inherently holy to sound bad singing, psalms or hymns that nobody knows. Like, if the band practices and they do a sound check and they get the levels and they're wearing in-ear monitors because it helps with the mix. And I don't have anything against that. Like, that can be really helpful. Right. But when you sense like a disproportionate amount of energy going into what you might consider the show or the performance, and less of it going into the expositing of the word or the discipling of people in the church, that's maybe where you're kind of like, man, where are the priorities here? Yeah.
You don't want to be, I mean, a healthy church body is one where there is real iron sharpening iron going on there. And that cannot be happening in a small church and cannot be happening in a big church.
Yes.
And there can be unbiblical teaching in a small church and in a big church.
Yes.
And so I do think you just have to, pray about it, talk to your husband about it, and go where you feel like the Lord is leading you. I think that we fell into a season of really criticizing the church in a period of our marriage. And it was because the church that we were, it was because of us. Yeah. But the church that we were going to we kind of would all do that together. We'd like sit and talk about how good our church experience was and compare it to other people's church experience and say that therefore theirs was wrong or something. And I just don't think that's healthy. I think as a part of the body of Christ, we should just be celebrating when the word is going out, when it is true and biblically based. And we should be praising the Lord that, his church members are fellowshipping together and gathering together to worship him. And, instead of having this bone to pick with the church. Yeah. I just think it's kind of not the right place to be putting all our energy is trying to tear down other Christians.
Yeah, I think so too.
Or other forms of worship or whatever,
Yeah, and again, like you said, iron sharpening iron probably does imply that there's going to be times where you call out Christian brothers and sisters, but hopefully there's a relationship established there, and that's the context of calling out these other brothers and sisters.
Yeah, I think it's cool when there's like conferences of pastors, and I'm not in that scene, so I don't know how that all works, but I think that's great when like pastors are calling out other pastors and stuff like that, or other church bodies, because there's this element of they know each other, or they've been at these same things, and they're just at this friendship level, or even professionally, to be able to call each other out.
Yeah.
And if we're just like throwing sticks and stones from 30,000 miles away and not going to do anything about it, then it's kind of unhelpful.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, like, again, we're publicly saying something here on a platform. And so I think that if somebody publicly wants to rebuke us or call us out, that's what we're opening ourselves up to.
Yeah.
And so I think if a pastor across the country publicly states something, or writes it in his book or posts it online, then he's setting himself up to public criticism. But when it comes to things that are being said in the like local church, well, then it should just be addressed on the local level. And that's just a whole complication of technology. It's a double-edged sword of technology where you're like, oh, okay, like this can, I guess, propel the gospel getting out to more people, but it also, propels more confusion as well, and maybe some false proclamations of the gospel, or a proclamation of a false gospel. So anyways, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with big churches. Just like you said, it's like with families. Having a bigger family doesn't make your family better. It's like there's amazing families that, like, there's amazing marriages that don't yet have kids, or the Lord hasn't blessed them with children yet. And it's like their marriage can be amazing. And there's
or never does bless them with children.
Exactly. And it's like they can have a strong, effective, fruitful marriage. And there's families that have one or two children that are a very healthy, vibrant family. And there's families that say, hey, we're going to trust the Lord, with everything. And they end up having 14 kids, but they're not fruitful in any other way. It's like we're fruitful in numbers, but they're not spiritually discipling them, and it's very unhealthy. And so I think it's the same goes with churches, where it's like it can be a small church that's extremely healthy and it's preaching the word and they're discipling people, and there can be small churches that are terrible, and have terrible doctrine and theology. And the same goes with big churches. Yeah.
And just in defense of the big families out there could be big families that are very fruitful as well.
Absolutely.
Aside from numbers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I feel like that was the only one.
Did I only give like the negative option for that one? Yeah. No, I would put your and my families in that category. It's like they were fruitful in numbers, and I think in discipleship.
I do. This is totally off topic, but I do have a bone to pick with not with you.
Okay.
But with the language surrounding, we trusted God for everything, so therefore we ended up with a ton of kids. But the family that has a smaller family doesn't trust God for everything.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Because
I do feel like there's trust involved with both of those things.
Wow. Oh, folks, do you want to hear Katie talk more about this? Do you want to hear? Maybe this could be a whole other episode. It sounds like a birth control episode is on the horizon. A family planning.
You can't tell me I'm not trusting God if we stop at 5 kids. No. Yeah, I think that the language around that is actually not always right. But anyways, that's a whole different thing.
Well, let's just wrap it up with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless, was there another question that was
there's one really quick one.
Well, yeah. Famous last words.
It is really quick.
Okay.
Can your kids, at least the older ones, name all of their aunts and uncles?
Yes.
There you go. It was quick. They can all name their aunts and uncles. They can't name all of their great aunts and uncles though, because they've got dozens of those still alive.
Right.
Which
yeah, I mean,
well, great aunt and uncle sounds really old.
Yeah.
Like my great aunt growing up was like a grandma, but they've got a lot of great aunts and uncles that are like 30s, 40s.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but that is probably going to be a challenge. When I think of, there's 11 kids in your family, 10 in my family. If they all get married, that's a lot of aunts and uncles. That's crazy. Yeah. They already have a lot right now.
Yeah, they have I would say they have like individual relationships with each one of their aunts and uncles. I think it's more impressive that they can name all their cousins.
Yes.
Because sometimes I get a little confused on my nieces and nephews.
Yeah, that's happened to me. Well, actually, no, I don't think it would. I don't think it's happened to me with my nieces and nephews yet. I feel like that's been pretty straightforward so far.
Yeah. Anyways, yes, it is fun.
Folks, thank you all so much for listening. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.